Hi, welcome to BeMORE. I'm Nicolette Wolfe, the CEO of BeMORE. And BeMORE is a charity that is passionate about embedding generosity into culture. And we do that through transforming young professionals into the philanthropists of today and tomorrow. It gives me great pleasure tonight to welcome again to BeMORE, Lord Michael Hastings. Michael, welcome back to BeMORE.
Thank you. I feel more by being back with BeMORE.
We feel a lot more too for having you, so thank you so much. Michael is going to be talking around the title, Give More, What's Stopping You? This is the second part of the series that he's kindly done for us. We are living in this changing time and it's incredibly challenging, and we're feeling challenged in terms of our objects of security, our value systems, our behaviours are forced to be changed at this time. And it would be very easy for us all to withdraw, to think only of ourselves and move into a survivor-like mentality. Yet at BeMORE, we're saying, try and look out in these moments of challenge. Seek and listen to those around you and see how you can support those in need, because through being generous, it is such an encouraging and rewarding experience, not only to those who you give to, but also yourselves as well. So we have invited Michael back with us tonight because he has a plethora of wisdom and experience in philanthropy that we just want to keep downloading. And he's here tonight to really comment on the changing challenges of the pandemic and just inspire us with his wisdom. So I'm not going to say much more. We have opened the chat. We'd love you to send in your questions. Michael's going to talk for a bit, but then we are going to open up the floor to questions to really dig deep into Michael's wisdom and try and extract what we can from tonight. So please do send in your questions. That's enough from me. And Michael, welcome again to BeMORE, and it's now over to you.
Thank you, and welcome to all of you who are online. I have two wonderful friends who are twins actually sitting around watching me. I'm having to figure out which one is which because they're pretty much identical, and they may well comment on the chat when I get round to answering questions depending on what you ask. So I just want to start with a couple of thoughts that I hope will provoke you a little bit, and then we can take it from there. I know when we had the last session, I read you a poem, those of you who were on the last session. So I'm going to read the same poem again because that poem was written way back in 1869 and it became popular in 1919. Now, 1919 was the Spanish flu, as it was called, which killed many tens of millions of people across Europe. 1869 had been a previous pandemic that was mainly in the Asian region, ironically, around China. And I have this incredible image of two women from the 1919s wearing face masks. In other words, we've been here before. We've had coronavirus in different forms. It was a different type of virus. But here is this reflection, written, as I said, from 1869, repeated in 1919, relevant in 2020. And people stayed at home and they read books and they listened and they rested and they did exercises and they made art and they played and they learned new ways of being and they stopped and they listened more deeply. Someone meditated, someone prayed, someone met their shadow. And people began to think differently, and people healed. And in the absence of people who lived in ignorant ways, dangerous, meaningless, heartless, the earth also began to heal. And when the danger ended and people found themselves they grieved for the dead, and they made new choices, and they dreamed of new visions and created new ways of living and completely healed the earth, just as they were healed. I'm very challenged by two lines in there. People began to think differently. I hope during the course of the last 4 or 5 months, you've been thinking differently. The consumption drivers, for many of us, have either not been possible because we actually literally haven't been able to go shop, buy, eat, do. We might have Amazoned a lot. It's not quite the same, is it? Endless cardboard boxes turning up at the door. It's not quite the same as the kind of glitter of looking in the windows and taking away the stuff. But we've had to think differently about whether our lives are driven entirely by consumption or whether they're driven by a need for protection, and with protection, protection of others, responsibility. And the other line that gets me in here is the earth was healed. I'm going to show you the front cover of this week's Time magazine. One last chance. Our world has been preoccupied by coronavirus for the last 5 months, and it's too easy to forget other things. To forget that we're actually in a climate pandemic as much as a virus pandemic. And we need the earth to heal, because if it doesn't heal, whatever we think we've kept of our lives, we could easily lose it by heightened temperatures, by earthquakes and pressures in the earth, by floods and disaster. I'm sure you know that of all the times in the last over 180 years that temperatures have been measured on Earth, the last 10 years have been the hottest ever recorded. And we're not on track to meet the Paris Climate Accord. We might end up with a vaccine that caps the virus for now. But reminding you that there was once one in 1919, and in known history, there have been over 15 major virus impacts on our planet. In fact, if any of you are lovers of Shakespeare and have read his works or watched his plays, he refers in 6 of his plays to the pandemic of the time. Viruses have always been around, and they're coming again. So we have to define ourselves not by protecting ourselves just to feel safe, but by what kind of world we want to create. What is this thing that needs to be healed? There's an environmental side of it, but there's also a human side of it, the kind of people we need to choose to be. I'm going to read you a quote from Albert Einstein, the great scientist. All of us wish we had the flexibility and strength and durability of his mind. But he said this, and you'll see why this is so relevant to the other pandemic. The world will not be destroyed, said Einstein, by those who do evil, but by those who watch them without doing anything. Do you get it? It won't be destroyed by those who do evil, but by those who watch them without doing anything. Martin Luther King, the great race campaigner, dying in 1968, said that the worst of all evils is to say nothing, do nothing, in the presence of the great attack of those who wish to destroy life. And here's another front page. So I showed you Time magazine's front page for this week. Here is The Economist's front page. Race. The black and white issue. The new ideology of race, it says. The pandemic of discrimination, hatred, anger, racism. The determination of other people's value by the color of their skin, and whether or not we attribute to that the same equality of person as we think of ourselves to be. I'm going to finish my comments with one more poem. I love poems because my father taught me poems as a child. He read me Rudyard Kipling's If every single Sunday. My brother and I used to worry when Sunday afternoon came after lunch. Dad was going to read Rudyard Kipling's If, and he did. He died when I was 16. So I had 16 years. Well, maybe as a baby he didn't, maybe, I don't know, but maybe he did. 16 years of Rudyard Kipling's If every Sunday without fail, every month, every year. I love it. And here's another poem I love deeply. It's called Youth, because I know probably that all of you online are younger than me. If you're not, please put in the chat, and I'd be curious to know how you're going to beat 62. But if you're younger than me, that's my assumption. I mean, even Nicolette's younger than me, but maybe not by much. And here is a poem, Youth, by a wonderful man called Samuel Ullman. And Samuel Ullman was reflecting at the turn of the First World War, 1915, 1919. Yeah, in the First World War, there was a pandemic called the Spanish flu. And he was reflecting really on what we attribute to the value of life. Young people are meant to have all of life. Old people are meant to have given life away. Well, Samuel Ullman reflected wisely like this. Youth is not a time of life. It is a state of mind. It's not a matter of rosy cheeks or red lips or supple knees. It's a matter of the will, a quality of the imagination, a vigor of the emotions. It's the freshness of the deep springs of inner life. Years can wrinkle the skin, but to give up enthusiasm wrinkles the soul. Worry, fear, self-doubt bows the heart and turns the spirit back to dust. Whether 60 or 16, there is in every human being's heart a lure of wonder, the unfailing childlike curiosity of what's next, and the joy of the game of living. In the center of your heart and my heart, there's a wireless station. So long as it receives messages of beauty, hope, cheer, courage, and power from men and women and from the infinite, so long are you young. But when your aerials are down and your spirit is covered over with the snow of cynicism and the ice of pessimism, then you have grown old, even at 20. I discovered that the best way to stay young, even at 60, is to give a lot of myself away, to constantly release from my fingertips the assets I may hold, the things I may possess, resources I may have control of, the time. Give yourself away. The more we do that, ironically, the happier we are. We can't be cynical when we're generous. We can't be full of joy if we're tight-pursed. So giving, philanthropy, generosity, these are the sources of life. Last story, and you must ask me some questions. My first full-time paid job was to be a teacher. When I was given the opportunity to be a teacher, although I'd had a part-time paid job before as a toilet cleaner, which I was proud to do well, but my first full-time paid job as a teacher, I couldn't get the money from the school I needed for the department I was meant to run to buy the books, and in those days we had videos and slides, and what was needed. And I remember going and speaking to the headmaster before I started at the school saying, what you're suggesting I have for this department, I'm barely going to be able to buy exercise books, let alone textbooks, let alone videos, let alone visuals, let alone anything. And he said, there's nothing we can do. We can't afford anything else. So I had a good think. I had a good pray. What can I do? At that time, I had £75 left in my personal account. I finished college, finished teacher training. I was down to my last pounds. I had £75 left. And I had a bright idea. I think God gave it to me, actually. He said, write to 12 friends and ask them to give you support to help you to achieve the budget you need. But you need to tell them that you're going to give your £75 away as well. So I did. I put in £75. Could you double it? Could you match it? Could you all give me £75? Could you give me £50? 11 of them wrote back. In those days, they sent checks, those things you had to go to the bank with, pieces of paper. Yep, money began to come back in, but it only made up around about 25% of what I needed. But one man came back with a check and a note. And the note said, Michael, here's what I can give, but here too is a phone number. Ring this number, say who you are, and you'll have everything you need. I had no idea who that number belonged to, but I'd given up my £75. My friends had given me a couple of hundred. I rang the number. This old man picks up the phone. Remember, I'm in my early 20s. I said my name, and he said, yes, I know who you are. And I said, well, I'm calling back. He said, I know why you're calling. How much is it you need? So I said the figure. It was actually £3,000. That's fine. There'll be a check in the post tonight. Thank you. Goodbye. Boom, phone goes down. I thought, does he even know my address? Well, the truth is my friend had given it to him. 2 days later, I had everything I needed because I was willing to give away. So I leave you with that thought and all those thoughts. And now you can ask some questions. You can throw tomatoes through 5G if you've got 5G. If not, 4G will do and they'll splatter your screen. But whether you want to disagree or agree, open for questions.
Michael, thanks so much. It's really inspiring to hear your stories. And there are many, many more where they came from, I'm sure. I think I just want to comment on is the fact that it's so exhilarating to hear that as a young man, you took the initiative and in return, your money came back and more for a good cause. Yet I'm really aware that some of us are feeling so sort of confined by lockdown, and we are anxious and we are a bit worried, and we're worried about our own finances at the moment, let alone giving to other people. What is the first small step, somebody who's really feeling like they can't see that big project or that big picture yet? What is the first step someone can take towards shifting out of that mindset towards being generous?
Well, all of us, certainly living in a country as we do here in the UK, and who knows who else is logged on from outside the UK, but let's imagine most of us are living in what we might call the prosperous West. Truth is we all do things to excess. The stuff we spend money on, we don't have to. I mean, if we're honest about it, stuff we didn't need to buy. There's coffees we didn't need to get, hot chocolates we didn't need to get, the extra haircut every week we didn't need to have. That particular, do I need those shoes, those trainers? I've already got two. Do I need the third? Does this have to be that expensive? There's so many choices that we're constantly making, and it would be better for all of us. a bit like that first poem said, that we made some tougher choices about not doing things. Now that inevitably then releases a bit of money. And as it releases a bit of money, we can either kind of hold it tightly or we can let it go. And I was down to my last £75. I had no savings. My father was dead. My mother was in the Caribbean. She had only money. In fact, she had no money left because they paid for our schooling. I got a grant to go to college. There was no money to fund me through university or teacher training. I was on my own, and I gave the £75 away. And I think it's about taking a tough choice to find value in generosity and joy in generosity and release in generosity. We spend more time fretting over watching our account dwindle than if we got rid of the surplus so we knew it had gone already. Make it easy on ourselves. And I think it is, Nicola, it's about those small choices, very small choices. Now, I can't remember whether the last time I told this story, but I'll tell it very quickly. 2 years ago, with Tear Fund, as an ambassador for Tear Fund, I went to Ethiopia, to the second city of Ethiopia, to see around about 200 amazing women in groups of about 20 to 25 each. And these women have developed a program with Tear Fund where they save their surplus pennies, not pounds, dollars, not pennies. As the program has run over the last 8 years, there are now 400,000 women in Ethiopia in this program, and they have $26 million banked by saving the pennies. And so they co-loan to each other. And we got to see amazing businesses that these women have started together because they've put the pennies together that otherwise were lying around. So we've all got to ask ourselves, what have we got that's spare? What can we find that needs to be spare that we don't need to spend? And can we combine resources with others to enable and empower?
Amazing. That's awesome. We've got a question here from Toby. He asks, what can young people who want to give away what they have away now do to ensure they can sustain that generous behavior for many years to come?
Well, it's all about being realistic as well as ambitious. Now, some people would accuse me of giving away my last £75 as being not realistic, nor even ambitious. That was just mad. Yeah, maybe, but that little bit of recklessness opened up a wonderful box of opportunity. It's about the mental disposition that we've got. And if our mental disposition is one of, I'd like to be free of the shackles of possession so that I can invest in development and prioritization and things that are more important than my happiness, then I will just release the stuff. So here's the bit of advice that I would give. Never wait to start giving when you have all the money to give easily. Because I promise you this, you won't start. You know, it's amazing how almost no matter what we earn, it all gets spent in the month. Very few people have meaningful savings, and it's just incredible how the money disappears, and we find things to spend it on. One of the good things of the last period has been people can't go on holidays. Now, what have they done with that money? That's an opportunity to put it aside. So begin the habit. From the moment the first pound hits your pocket, give away from that. Start it at the youngest moment and continue to give it. and continue to increase it. I started my process of giving at the age of 14, and I've never stopped. So it's just make it a habit. It's a good habit. And, you know, truth is, could you buy more things if you kept more back? Yes, of course you could. But would you use them? How many of us live in cluttered spaces where there's so much stuff around, we don't even know what's there? So begin with a habit. Make it into a life pattern. Turn it then into freedom.
Brilliant. Thank you, Michael. Another question here. If there was a choice between giving locally or overseas in the next year, which would you recommend and why?
Well, we have to square up to the reality difference between the lives we live here in the United Kingdom and the truth of that part of our world which remains substantially and significantly poor. It's not poorer, it is poor. We've gone through the last 4 months where, however you see the government, they have done well by provision. May not have done brilliantly by organizing the best way to have handled the pandemic in terms of the health outcomes, and that's tragic. But in terms of providing hospital beds and equipment available through the extra 9 Nightingale hospitals, well done. In terms of the job retention scheme, well done. In terms of the support loans, not perfect, but at least they've been there for small businesses and for self-employed people, well done. In terms of not having anybody evictable in this period, well done. So many protections. Is it possible for those protections, for those resources to be as freely available in the rest of the world? No, it's not. We can borrow our way through many things. But there is a whole corner of our world, particularly in sub-Saharan Africa and some parts of Latin America and some parts of Southeast Asia, where poverty figures are on the rapid increase. The estimates are that that people living in extreme poverty and hunger, as a result of the additional 250 million people added because of coronavirus, will take the figure now back over 1 billion. So that's 1 in 7 people in the world. 1 in 7 people in the world are struggling on $1.50 a day, and some less. So I would argue this. Reality is around us. We need to be engaged in reality around us. Give into what we see, what we hear, what we know, but also give into what you can't see. Support agencies, charities, organizations, networks, especially in the less developed world. Never use the term third world. It's not a third world. It's the same world as we're in. It's just economically less developed. And at some point, we pray, we hope it catches up and even exceed us. Ironically, and I'm sure many of you know this, we are now, and we thank God still to be, as the UK, in the top 10 of world economies. But we're number 6. India is number 5. And once we thought that India was just a destitute pot of curry sauce. No more. The world is catching us up. China is number 2, and it's not too far off being number 1. So let's invest in the development of those on the margins of life at the same time as the community that's around us.
Michael, thank you. Just a message from Pip here. She said, "This is so inspiring. Thank you." She has a question. In an ideal world, how would large corporates structure their giving?
Well, isn't it a wonderful thing that an ideal world doesn't exist? But can we try to make an ideal world? Yes. Okay. when I worked at KPMG, we always challenged and encouraged every country partnership to give generously to not-for-profits and community organizations around them and within the countries where they operated. So KPMG operates in 165 countries in the world, and we encouraged every one of the 165 separate partnerships to be actively engaged. And I'm proud to say that when I left in retirement last year, the last recorded figures that were reported in the KPMG annual review 2019 showed $130 million of generous donations and contribution from KPMG to communities around it. Proud of that fact. Highly significant, very generous, but not generous enough. And the reason I say that is this: giving money is a very, 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 very necessary and fundamental responsibility. Giving skills, the capacity to strengthen other people's opportunity to grow their own employment or their own work or their own reality and security, that is as equally valuable. It's not one or the other, it's both and. I wanted to push more and more and more people to invest their time, capacity, skills, insights, knowledge, awareness, expertise, experience, thoughtfulness, perspective, to bring that to bear for those who don't have it, especially, and if we're perfectly candid about this, most charities are pretty small enterprises. You know, we've got over 400,000 charities in the UK, but here's the shocking figure. Only around 15% have incomes greater than £50,000 a year. So that means that there's a vast plethora of hundreds of thousands of small organizations trying to do meaningful good. But there's millions of people who could be effective trustees, who could work voluntarily to make better, become more prominent and possible. So giving time is as equally valuable as giving money. But it's not just time, it's skills, it's expertise, it's strengthening. I'll tell you a little story. So when I started at KPMG in 2006, on my way to Argentina, my first overseas business trip for the firm, I stopped off in Kingston, Jamaica. Didn't live in Kingston, so I wasn't going to see any family or any connections. It was a stop in order to see what KPMG was doing in Kingston, Jamaica. Now, that's a pretty troubled city, and it has a very high violence and death rate. And it's a complex place, and I understand it well, as I spent many years living in Montego Bay, but not Kingston. Anyway, the firm wanted to show me one of its great gift investments, a private hospital, where people who can pay, and those who can't pay, who can't get help through the state system, which was, to be honest, pretty shaky, would get free support. So a really open-handed, open-hearted, generous hospital. Now, they were asking KPMG, in advance of this visit by me and the leadership of the KPMG firm in Jamaica, they were asking for quite a lot of extra money. And they kind of laid out an agenda of the money they needed. So we thought, okay, let's take a judgment call on this. We brought the head of audit with us. As we went around the hospital, in room after room, in clinical space after clinical space, in surgery after surgery, he spotted efficiencies. When we tabulated the efficiencies that the accountant spotted, it came out at more money than they were asking for. Now that's the power of skills. Because we could have written them a check, sent them the money. I won't tell you how much it was, but it was large. But we were able to spot the wastes, the inefficiencies, which if corrected, provided more resource. That's why skills are so important. That's why whatever you're doing professionally, whatever business you're in, if your company says we want to give, then tell them, yes, give cash, give long-term, give to support core purposes, No organization runs without administration. Somebody must pay the electricity bill and the photocopier bill. Somebody must pay for the administration. It is vital, but give the potency of skills to make efficient, effective, and generous commitments.
That's brilliant. Thank you, Michael. Another question here. Toby, during your time progressing in the corporate world, how did you manage your time to allow you to invest in generous giving?
Well, I get asked this question quite a lot, and I get asked this question quite a lot by the people I mentor as well, which is, how do you find the time? And part of the answer is that in the same way as I was just talking about the need to trap the pennies so they don't just linger around and fall away, and so bring them to good use, trap the pennies, we also need to trap the time. And if we took an honest, really honest audit of our time use, we'd be stunned at how much time we waste. This wasn't from KPMG, but this was from another major corporate in Canary Wharf, which produced an interesting assessment by permission of its staff of actively monitoring movements over a period of time, all by permission. It wasn't done secretly, to come up with an assessment of how much of every hour, 60 minutes, was work. I wonder what you think it was. Well, the answer is 20 minutes. On average, every hour was 20 minutes of work. So what was the other 40 minutes? Wandering up and down, chatting to whoever, swiping on the phone, going outside, heading to the loo, that's okay, standing up, having a drink, looking around, flicking through a magazine. Now, none of that is bad. None of that is wrong. But it's to say that most of us don't manage our time very well. And time is a commodity. It's often said in the city world, time is money. And that's true. If you're a lawyer, my older daughter's a lawyer, every hour costs a lot of money. Consultants charge by the hour. Lawyers charge by the hour. Most of us drift from hour to hour. So if we manage time tightly, manage it well, be very focused about sleep so that we can get up earlier, make more of the day, put more in by effective time management, it's amazing what freedom you gain. But you see, it's like any discipline. Time is something we have to manage. And those who do smart business development programs, MBA programs, executive development programs, I would be lucky enough to do a couple of those. You always get told that the management of your time is your first mastery. It's not what you know, it's how can you deploy what you know in the most effective way by having the maximum time to bring it to effect. That means managing the time. So I leave you with the answer to that question, really, which is, don't treat time as a careless commodity. Treat it as a building block of a generous life.
Great. Thank you so much, Michael. Just want another question. They say that many charities in the UK, around 50%, will fold in the next 6 months or so because of the coronavirus. And whilst we're encouraging people to give to charities, some are clearly going to be more risky to give to than others at the moment. And I'm just interested in your point of view in terms of how do you decide which is a safe charity to give to in this moment? And I suppose on the back of that question is it better to give to a COVID-19 frontline charity where the impact of need is great now, and when you give, you'll see that need solved more immediately? Or should you really just be giving to a charity that campaigns more for a longer sustainable change within this COVID pandemic crisis?
Well, there's a lot in that. There's a lot in that question, and one of the starting points of an answer is to say, actually, many charities need to fold because there are too many, and there are too many fighting over the basics. I mean, I'm sad to say I know significant numbers of charities where the income levels per year are less than £20,000, and the fight is on year in, year out, just to get that £15,000. And maybe 10,000 of it goes towards the purpose, but 5,000 is all about the fight. There are a lot of charities that need to merge. I had the privilege of being the chairman of Crime Concern, which I grew from £250,000 to 25 million over 20 years. And I merged it with another charity called the Rayner Foundation, which was of a similar size, about 25 million, similar number of staff. They were working more from the north of England into Scotland. We were working more, this was crime prevention, community safety stuff. We were working more in the south of England, London region. And we put the two together. It took a year to put the two together. And as a result of putting the two together, we didn't just create 25 million, create a 50 million organization. We created a 60 million organization, because when you brought about the effective synergies of merging, you release more resources. Ironically, it sets money free and it sets people free to fulfill their purpose more. So I would say many charities need to merge, many charities need to close, but what never doesn't need to happen are critical services, especially for people who are disabled, who have less ability physically or through special needs, learning abilities, learning disabilities, or physical needs. Those people are more highly vulnerable. Charities which are engaged in supporting the older age population, those charities definitely need continuing commitment of resources. And charities which are looking for medical solutions to deal with critical illness, those charities need continuing support. So we have to be quite programmatic about where we might put money, resources, whatever we have. But don't fear charities going out of business, because not all of them need to exist. And I do think we've had an uncomfortable plethora of too many, and that does need to turn into what is a desirable number to deliver the services required. It's a tough thing to say, and many people said to me when I set about the process of merging Crime Concern and the Rayner Foundation with the chairman of the Rayner Foundation, we agreed together we would do this. And so many people said to me, nobody ever does that. Nobody ever gives up their charity and gives up their name and gives up their position. I said, well, we are. We're doing it because there is a bigger and a greater good. So it's a tough message for the charity world, I'm afraid, Nicolette, and for the questioner. But where should we prioritize? I would say clearly prioritize the most vulnerable groups, sometimes those small charities that are delivering home-based care or food services for disabled people, and they tend to be quite small. They do need that extra £100. They do need that extra £50. It does make a difference, and most of those charities are run by volunteers. So there's nobody picking up a salary, and very often there's not an office, but there is somebody just organizing a great giving life.
Brilliant. Just one final question, Michael. If you imagine that you had been given a billboard in Piccadilly Circus, one of those neon light ones, right now for the next month, for all of those who are slowly coming out of lockdown into Soho for the evening and into their work locations once again, what would you write on it?
It's a good one.
I'll give you a moment.
Oh, no. I'd borrow from Theodore Roosevelt's The Man in the Arena. You can call it The Woman in the Arena as well, but I'm afraid to say, remember, this was written in a time when they wrote about men in the arena, but there we go. It's not the critic who counts, not the one who points out how the strong man stumbles, or where the doer of deeds could have done them better. The credit belongs to the one who's actually in the arena, whose face is marred by dust and sweat and blood, who strives valiantly, who errs, who comes short again and again, who spends themselves in a worthy cause, who at the very best knows in the end the triumph of high achievement, and who at the worst, if they fail, at least fails while daring greatly, so that their place shall never be with those cold and timid souls who neither know victory nor defeat. In summary, I wish to put on the board, he tried and kept trying, and sometimes succeeded and taught others that to give is to live.
Brilliant. Excellent way to end our conversation tonight, Michael. It's been such a pleasure once again. Thank you so much. I know that we have all been so inspired, and I'm certainly going to play this again once it's up on YouTube, because there is so much in this, so much. I'm also going to steal all of those poems and put them into my own podcasts and speeches. So thank you so much. Michael, you've kindly agreed to do a part 3 of Give More, What's Stopping You on the 7th of September, 8 p.m. BST, and we'll bring out the link for that in due course. If you want to join in the next BeMORE online experience, just go to bemore.co.uk and you can go to book your place and sign up. We launch new BeMORE experiences on a Monday evening, 7 sessions, weekly evening sessions, and it's a brilliant way to get together with people and just start learning how to give and just start giving to charities now who are in need. So don't hesitate, do sign up. People are starting their generosity journey just like you, and together we can create and transform you guys into the most joyful of givers, really making those differences now. You can also email us if you want to find out more, or even get the link to Lord Hastings' webinar just now at hello@bemore.co.uk. That's hello@bemore.co.uk. Well, that's all from me. Michael, thank you so much, and we can't wait to catch up again with you in September. So thank you. And
thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening.
Yeah, good evening and good night.
Good night.